city out here looting. How can we stand here and not do shit? All this smoke over the hood, looking like low clouds. Cars with no miles on fire, they broke down. White people with a sharpshooter peering outside of the sunroof with an automatic rifle. This appears to be a scene that you might see in Operation Desert Storm, and we've been seeing this all night. It's a trap. It's a trap. Why they ain't tell us red and blue? Don't matter when you black. Matter of fact, we're blindfolds. Bunch of lost souls, kids shot dead in the streets. Now they eyes closed. How you call it angels when his king's getting beat up? And Gil Garcetti in his office with his feet up. No way. Yo, black man, stop. Be right back. Welcome. We live on YouTube. Sun going down, so the Chevy's about to roll out. Fiends scratching themselves, stumbling out the dope house. Niggas tying bandanas, about to put the drum on. Kids trying to make it home for street lights. Come on, the way we live is sad. 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 So grab that gun, load that clip, grab that torch, light that shit, grab that stick, grab that brick, throw it. It's time to ride. If you don't see black on in the window, it's on fire. Start here, end up over there. The smell of gunpowder in the air. And just so clear, this is pain and despair. We burn our own shit and we aware and don't care. Tell the National Guards to disappear. We got guns too and we ain't scared. So fuck the man, fuck the President Bush and his legislation. Shit gotta change, we ain't waiting. This is from that 1992 album from Game. You know what I'm saying? Just because you support your teams, you support, you know what I mean, local businesses, don't mean you're not a revolutionary, don't mean you're not an activist, don't mean that you was not down for your people at a drop of a dime. You know what I'm saying? King up and that was they ass. So it's bottle rockets through the window. Kids that would never smoke an endo. Fiends kicking indoors, stealing Nintendos. Niggas robbing liquor stores with taped up duck hunt guns. City burning, but it's fucked up fun. National Guards on the corner, they don't know the hood, they foreigners. We was busting at the cops before Chris Dorner. Ghetto birds flying over the hood, they see us showing the fuck out, cleaning them trucks out. Niggas mobbing down the streets. Yeah, man. I want to hear something else real quick. Just a little bit. You know, I play this a lot. You know what I'm saying? What makes you ashamed of being black? Shit, nothing in this fucking world, bro. In this white man's world. I ain't saying I'm innocent at all. I'm just saying it's white man's world. This song for all those times that I messed up, but we messed up. Dear sister, got me twisted up in prison. I miss you. Crying, looking at my nieces and my nephews' picture. They say don't let this cool world get you. Kinda suspicious, swearing one day you might leave me for somebody that's rich. Twist the cap off the bottom. I take a sip and see tomorrow. Gotta make it if I have to beg above. Love letters late night, locked down and quiet. Your brothers don't receive they bail, best believe we ride. Eating Jack Mac, staring at the walls of silence inside this cage where they captured all my ways and violence. And it's time I learned a few lessons, never to fall for riches. Apologies to my true sisters, fall for riches. Help me raise my black nation, reparations are due. It's true, caught up in this world, I took advantage of you. So tell the babies how I love them, precious boys and girls. Born black, this white man's world. And all I heard was, well, they did everything wrong. Yeah, born black, this white man's world. All my ghetto motherfuckers are around black. All right, man. Just a few songs, man, to wake me up, get me going. You know, we got a jam-packed show. We talking riots. We talking about Confederate bases. We talking Atlanta. We talking
Just a lot of stuff. I hope y'all enjoyed the last podcast we did. Since then, I think before that, you had uh, Rashad Brooks was murdered. I think by now it's been ruled a homicide. From what I understand, he was shot twice, one in the back, the one in his rear, and all he did was fire a taser. Now, he's wrestling with the cops. We know you can't do that, but a taser is not life threatening. Yeah, it can injure you, but it doesn't take your life. It doesn't take the life of other ones. So he'll be shot twice in the back while fleeing. And from what I understand, he asked to walk home. He told the cops that he ain't want to drive while he was intoxicated. I don't know for sure, so don't I'm not saying that as 100% true, but this is just something I've heard, that he did inform the police, and they did, want to arrest him and detain him, and he wasn't, I guess, having it. But off that, man, you can't show up to kill somebody. You can't show up and because you're afraid or because you lose a fight, you result to killing somebody. That just is not something that should ever be. If you're sworn in to protect the people, especially after we see multiple Caucasians wield swords and rifles and guns and show up to courthouses and guns, and they don't get tased, they don't get tear gas, they don't get anything. They show up and they show out and they go home. When we show up, we get shot and killed. So obviously, there is something seriously wrong with that. Okay, so let's jump in again. Welcome to Black Man's Thoughts. I've uploaded a lot of footage from the Million Man March here in Columbia, South Carolina. I thought it was an interesting event. Got a chance to have a few interviews and see how the public is feeling about what's going on. And when people just tired of it, they're tired of suffering. They're tired of seeing that people suffer. And you know what? I don't feel the need. One thing I keep hearing is when we're all in a big group, the first thing somebody always feels like they got to say, I'm not saying that all lives don't matter. Well, we don't have to say that shit because all lives is not dying. We're dying. We're the ones that's getting killed. We're the ones that's getting executed. I don't feel the need to have to always explain what I'm feeling. I don't feel that shit. You know what I'm saying? Another thing is, I said it before. If I'm at a Black Lives Matter protest and our people is dying, how dare you show up with another slogan, trans lives matter, gay right? That has nothing to do with Rashad Brooks. That has nothing to do with we being killed in the streets. I think that is a very selfish thing to do, to take and to take energy away from run protests to shed light on what you believe when this is a different type of protest. This isn't for rights. This is to stop killing somebody. So I just think that y'all get on that and y'all start peeping what's going on. They're starting to put Black Lives Matter and mirror that with Pride Month. They started mirroring that with Pride, this and that. And that's not what it should have been started for. That's not what it was started for. It's for you to stop killing us. It's for the people to stop being executed by cops or in the white supremacist movement or white supremacist system. It has nothing to do with your belief in what type of sex you want to be identified with. You know what I mean? And I really don't respect that. And people, please peep that, because if they're trying to mirror Black Lives Matter with pride, with gay pride, then I think that you just start your own or get another group if that's what you're going to do. Because remember, this was not started for gay pride. This was start for brothers and sisters to stop dying at the hands of cops. Okay. So a few topics that's been coming up, and I'll start with one: the Confederate base names. Now, the protests are working, and one of the conversations that came up was the names of bases from Confederate leaders or generals, and they needed to change their names. And Donald Trump said he's not even going to listen to that. Now, a lot of people, um, especially a lot of our people, you know, we have a different understanding and feeling when it comes to the flag, when it comes to being an American, when it comes to being called an American, because remember, we didn't come here by choice. We came here by slavery, captured, beaten, history stolen and changed, names and children ripped apart from families. We came here on the world's most brutal uh, force ever known to mankind. So when you're going to sit there and tell me that a base that I got to go to is named after somebody who enslaved my people, who beat my people, who changed the history and the names of my people, who sat there and beat women as they screamed and cried as their babies were being sold on an auction block, while fathers were being castrated, were being raped by white men and beaten and dehumanized in front of their wives and in front of their daughters. You mean to tell me I'm supposed to be okay with a base that I've joined the United States Army, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard to protect this country that has never been there for me? I'm supposed to be okay to say I'm going to go to a base that is named after one of those generals or one of those leaders that's done all that to my people. I think that is a very, very sad, selfish, and inhumane thing for somebody to expect somebody else to have to um, go through. Okay, so let's start off with this, man. One of the base names. Okay, I'm gonna start off. Okay, Camp. Let me see. Camp Beer Guard near Pineville, Louisiana. Okay, it was named after General Pierre Gustave Touant Beergard. Okay, Bogart or whatever, however it was called. Who gives a shit? Um, the fact of the matter is, if you really want to be technical, these people fought against and wanted to separate from the United States of America. So by fact of the matter is, wouldn't they be called traitors? Right? They would be called traitors. They would be called people against this United States. So again, fuck his name. This is who he is, right? He was born in 1818, lived through 1893, when our people were well into slavery. Okay, uh, he is commonly known to as PGT Bulgard, but he was raised, used his first name. Who gives a shit? Okay, what I want to get to is okay. He was a Confederate. He was in the United States Navy. Uh, it's kind of hard looking this stuff up on my cell phone. I want to get to his early life. That's why I want to read a lot of these early lives, guys. Biergard was born at the Contras sugarcane plantation in Saint Bernard Parish, Louisiana, 20 miles outside of New Orleans, to a French Creole family. Okay, he was a mix of French and Italian ancestry, um, member of an Italian noble family whose family was migrated who had migrated first to France, then to Louisiana. So guess what? He's a fucking immigrant. Okay. So when you hear them talking about these Mexicans, when you hear them talking about these other brothers and sisters that's coming over from Africa, that's coming over, they talking some of these immigrants. Remember, these are the bases that they trying to keep. We're fucking immigrants. Okay. What else? As a child, Biergard, listen to this. I want to read this because of this. As a child, Biergard befriended and played with slave boys his own age. They couldn't even name their. They couldn't even give these brothers names. They're only known as slave boys, right? And was weaned as a baby by a Dominican slave woman. Okay, they felt so much to put her in there. Why the hell they didn't put the sister's name? He grew up on a large one-story house, unlike later plantation palaces, but a mansion of aristocracy. I don't know how to pronounce that. Excuse my ignorance. By the standards of his time, Beauregard would hunt and ride in the woods and fields. I don't give a shit. But I definitely wanted to read how this is how he grew up as an immigrant playing with slave boys and had a Dominican, and what does it say? A Dominican slave woman who weaned him, who probably suckled from her breast. This is, again, this comes, and this is the name of what base? Camp Burgard in Pineville, Louisiana. That's one base that needs to be changed. Okay. Fort Benning. Fort Benning is a United States Army post straddling the Alabama Georgia border next to Columbus, Georgia. Okay, we have a lot of us have family and friends. I got my brothers that's in the army. Um, I had sisters that's in the army. I have family members that's in the army, uncles that's in the army, and a lot of times you hear about Fort Benning. But let's go look at this guy's who this is named after. Let's see. Fort Benning, named after Henry L. Benning. Okay, Henry L. Benning. This is Fort Benning, named after Henry L. Benning. Okay, April 2nd, 1814 to 1817. He's a general in the Confederate Army. Okay, he's also a lawyer and legislator and a judge in the Georgia Supreme Court. So now you're dealing with Georgia and living in Georgia. I noticed that a lot of times Georgia try to make it hard for you to hard to see Georgia's slave history. They're trying to hide that a lot and act like they was one of the last people to come into it and all that stuff. But Georgia used to hang a lot of brothers and sisters. Okay, Benning was born on a plantation in Columbia County, Georgia, the son of a Pleasant Moon and Mandolin Merriweather White Benning. Okay, who gives a shit? While as a student, he was a member of the Phi Kappa Literary Society. That's another thing we need to touch on about these Greek sororities that have Greek and European. I guess I don't know for sure. I'll have to look it up. Histories attached to them, and people just flocking to this stuff. Okay, so that's yeah, that's one of them. That's Fort Benning. Uh, it doesn't say too much about his early life. After college, he moved to Columbus, Georgia, which later he had, he would be at home for the rest of his life. He had admitted to the bar at the age of 21. Who cares? Um, let's move on. Another one is Fort Bragg, North Carolina. I definitely got to say something about the Carolinas since I live in the Carolinas. This is in this is in North Carolina. Fort Bragg is a military installation in North Carolina. The installation borders the towns of Fayetteville and Spring Lake. Okay, so who was this named after? It is named after Confederate General Braxton Bragg, who had previously served in the United States Army in the Mexican American War. Okay, let's look on this dude. Shoot, Fort Bragg. Okay, he was General Braxton Bragg. Okay, born March 22nd, 1817 to September 27th, 1776. Okay, was an American Army officer during the Second Seminole War and Mexican Army, and later a Confederate Army officer who served as a general in the Confederate Army. Okay, let's get to his his early life. Bragg was born in Warrenton, North Carolina, one of six. Uh, he often ridiculed as a child because I don't give a shit. Okay, for allegedly, okay, he was often ridiculed as a child because of rumors about his mother's prison sentence for allegedly murdering an African American freeman. And some of those rumors stated that he was born in prison. His mother was accused of murdering, okay, a brother or a sister who was free. Okay, this is Fort Bragg who they want to name this crap after, okay? Um, the principal biographer of Bragg's early life and career states that despite these rumors, the Bragg family was law-abiding. Law-abiding. How can it be law-abiding? His mother's in fucking prison, okay? Although considered by his neighbors to be from a lower class. Thomas Bragg was a carpenter who became wealthy, um, went to one of the best schools in the state. Uh, he descended from Thomas Bragg, 1579 to 1665, who was born in England and settled in the colony of Virginia. In the thousands of letters that Bragg wrote during his lifetime, he spoke fondly of his father, but never mentioned his mother. I wonder why. Okay. Okay, I'm not going to get too much in him. But again, these are immigrants. So again, when we talk about building a wall and we're talking about doing all this type of stuff, remember the people that they're fighting for to keep these Confederate armies or Confederate bases, these people were immigrants. These people they're upholding and want to keep immigrants who came from another place and say we want to memorialize them forever. But yet modern immigrants, they want to build a wall to keep out. So is it really about the immigrants or is it about the nationality of that person that they want to keep out? Okay, let's go on. Let's see who else we got. So far we did Camp Begard, we get Fort Benning, we did Fort Bragg. Let's do Fort Gordon near Grovetown, Georgia, named after John Brown Gordon. This is Fort Gordon. John Brown Gordon, born February 6, 1832 to July 9th, 1904, was an attorney, a planter, in the Confederate Army. Okay, let's look at their early life. I like looking at their early life, right? John Brown Gordon of the Scots descendants and was born on the farm of his parents, Zachariah Gordon, and his wife in Upson, Georgia, County, Georgia. It was a lot of these Georgians. My grandmother would always tell me that our family was coming from America's Georgia, man. So Georgia has a lot of history to me, and it's some place that I really love because I would, speak to my grandmother, and she would tell me a lot of stories about Georgia. So it's very interesting hearing these small towns in Georgia. He was the fourth of 12 children. Okay, a lot of them fought in the Revolutionary War. His family moved to Walker County, Georgia, by 1840. This is all during big time slavery, where his father was recorded in a U.S. Census that year as owning a plantation of 18 slaves. Gordon was a student at the University of Georgia, where he was a member of the Mystical Seven Society. He left before, okay, whatever. Um, Okay. In 1860, Gordon owned one slave, a 14-year-old girl. His father owned four slaves in that same census. So in 1860, he's still owning slaves. Okay. So, okay, hold on. What did I just see? Confused. It is extremely difficult to determine Gordon's exact role in the Klan. Wow. Listen to this. This is for Gordon, right? It is extremely difficult to determine Gordon's exact role in the Klan, but given the nature of his testimony, he was almost consistent travel throughout Georgia and the South, and his desire to maintain peace, social order, and white supremacy. One can conclude with reasonable certainty that he was at least uh, titular, how you pronounce the word? Titular head of the Georgia Ku Klux Klan. You hear this crap, man? This is what they want to keep. This is the memorials. Yeah, this is a ranking member. This is the people that they want to keep. They're saying that you can put together by reason of the evidence and the history of him that he was a ranking member in the Ku Klux Klan. Even so, he probably had little knowledge of and little control over local claverns, as this terrorist association was never fully organized. Although it is remotely possible that Jordan was unaware of threats and violence, Southern whites so often, he was the head of the goddamn Klan, and he didn't know about the threats and violence they did on blacks. What kind of crap are they trying to? This is that double talk. This is that double talk you got to look on. It seems more plausible that Gordon simply looked the other way. Interesting, right? And counted such excesses as the price that had to be paid if social peace, a peace determined and defined exclusively by Southern whites. It ain't no social peace. This is only white peace. This is only white advancement. Okay, was to be regained and preserved. It never left anything. So there had to be anything. It was just there because remember, we were slaves. They didn't have anything they had to worry about. Okay. Gordon may not have condoned the violence employed by the Klan members. Okay, that sounds stupid. But he did not question or oppose it when he left when he felt it was unjustified. This is by Ralph Lowell excerpt, the John Brown Gordon, Soldier, Southerner, American, page 149. Very interesting. I'm glad I went down there because there's more on him being in the Klan. Now that's Fort Gordon there, Grovetown, Georgia, named in honor of John Brown Gordon, the high-ranking Ku Klux Klansman. That's deep. Let's go to Fort A.P. Hill near Bowling Green, Virginia, named for Virginia native and Confederate Lieutenant General A.P. Hill. Again, this is Fort A.P. Hill in Bowling Green, Virginia, right? Lieutenant General or Lieutenant General, um, I don't know the difference, is a three-star military rank, okay? Used in many countries. The rank, okay, I don't care about the rank. Let's go to this dude's, okay. Ambrose Powell Hill Jr., a Confederate from 19 I'm from November 9th, 1825 to April 2nd, 1865, was a Confederate general who was killed in the American Civil War. He is usually referred to as A.P. Hill, okay, to differentiate him from another unrelated Confederate general, Daniel Harvey Hill. Okay, let's go to these early laws, man. This is how you hold on. Go to early life. Hill, known to his family as Powell and to his soldiers as Little Powell, born in Culpeper, Virginia. All right. Hill was named for his uncle Ambrose Powell Hill from 1785 to 1858. Obviously, there's a lot of slavery going on, right? Let's go. Let's go down. Let's go around. So far, just a boring life. He suffered urinary infections. I don't give a damn. Okay, he served in the Seminole Wars. He was promoted. Okay, so it doesn't really say too much about him. Um, say too much, really, too much anything of interest about him. Yeah, let's go on to somebody else. Okay, we're almost done. Ooh, actually, right there, Fort Hood, Killeen, Texas. I think my little brother was there. Fort Hood and Killeen, Texas, and I think my little nephew's there. Right? Let's check this out. Hold on. It was named after John Bell Hood, who's best known for commanding the Texas Brigade during the American Civil War. From June 1st or June 29th, 1831 to August 30th, 1879, was a Confederate general during the American Civil War. Okay, you know what the Civil War was about? Is about, the South being able to keep slaves. Okay? Uh, he was born in Owningville, Kentucky, the son of John Wills Hood, a doctor, and Theo Theoasia French Hood. I don't know, whatever that means. I don't feel like reading all that. I want to get to the juicy part. Doesn't really say too much. He just was a Confederate general. Yeah. Yeah, it just says he was a Confederate general. Civil War. It doesn't say anything interesting about him that I feel the need to really bring out. But my goodness, man, knowing that somebody was a Klan leader, one of the leaders of a Klan, that's crazy to me. That's insane to me. Yeah, that's crazy to me. Okay, we did Fort Hood, Fort Lee, Princetown, George County, named after Robert Lee. Now, y'all know who Robert Lee is. Robert Edward Lee was an American and Confederate soldier best known as a commander of the Confederate States Army. He was a commander, bro, during the Civil War. He was the commander of the South. Okay, he commanded the Army of Northern Virginia from 1862 until it surrendered in 3 years later in 1865. Okay, uh, and earned a reputation as a skilled tactician. Not really, because they lost. All right. Dang, man. He has a look at this late 1850s Arlington plantation in and the Curtis slaves. This is crazy, man. This dude, we're gonna read some of this stuff. Okay, Lee was born at Stanford Hall Plantation in Westmoreland County, Virginia, to Henry Lee the third and Anna. Okay, screw his parents. What else? In 1812, Lee's father moved permanently to the West Indies. Okay, a lot of our history, a lot of the black people's history is in the islands, right? Y'all know that, right? So his father was in the West Indies. Lee attended Eastern View, a school for young gentlemen in uh, Fauquier County, Virginia, and then the Alexander Academy, free for local boys. Okay, he started brought up to be a practicing Christian. I don't know what a practicing Christian means. Uh, okay, let's go to this. In 1857, his father-in-law, George Washington Parke Curtis, died, creating a serious crisis when Lee took on the burden of executing the will. Curtis' will encompassed vast land holdings and hundreds of slaves, balanced against massive debts, and required Curtis' former slaves to be emancipated by my executors in such manner as to my executors may seem most expedient and proper. The said emancipation to be accomplished in not exceeding 5 years from the time of my decease. The estate was in disarray, and the plantation had been poorly managed and were losing money. Lee tried to hire an overseer to handle the plantation. So Lee is trying to save his relative's farm or his plantation of slaves, hiring a overseer to handle the plantation in his absence, writing to his cousin, I wish to get an energetic, honest farmer who, while he will be considerate and kind to the Negroes, will be firm and make them do their duties. This is somebody they want to keep going on, right? In 2020. But Lee failed to find a man for the job and had to take a 2-year leave of absence from the army in order to run the plantation himself. He thought it was so fitting that he keep these brothers on and sisters on the place that he left the army to go see his farm, right? Lee's cruelty on the Arlington plantation nearly led to a slave revolt. Since many of the slaves have been given to understand that they were to be made free as soon as Curtis died, and protest angrily at the delay. So they figured as soon as Curtis died, remember they have 5 years. They're like, yo, we need to be free. We should be free. Okay. In May 1858, Lee wrote to his son Rooney, I had some trouble with some other people. Reuben, Parks, and Edwards, in the beginning of the previous week, rebelled against my authority, refused to obey my orders, and said they were as free as I was, etc., etc. I succeeded in capturing them and lodging them into jail. They resisted to overpower and call upon the other people to rescue them. Less than 2 months after they were sent to Alexandria jail, Lee decided to remove these 3 men and 3 female house slaves from Arlington and sent them under lock and key to slave trader William Overton Winston in Richmond, who was instructed to keep them in jail until he can find a good and responsible slaveholder to work them until the end of the 5-year period. Lee ruptured the Washington and Curtis tradition of respecting slave families, and by 1860, he had broken up every family but one on the estate, of whom had been together since Mount Vernon days. It could go on the Norris case. He has a lot of information about him being a slaveholder. But think about what it say. He had broken up all of the families. So when we go around and talk about who we're related to, how do we get our last names? It's because of traitors like him who took pride in not letting these brothers free and breaking up their you know their history and their name. This is what he did. This is the people that they want to keep and to protect, right? This that was what uh Fort Lee in Princeton County, Georgia. Okay, we got a few more. Fort Pickett, Virginia Army National Guard installation, right? Leesville, Louisiana, named in honor of the Right Reverend Leonidas Polk, uh, I don't know, Episcopal bishop and Confederate general, in honor of Right Reverend Leonidas Polk. Let's see who Leonidas Polk was. April 10th, 1806 to June 14th, 1864. Was a planter in Maury County, Tennessee. Let's see. Let's check out his early years. Yeah, it doesn't say anything interesting. Let's look at this antebellum life. Polk was born in Raleigh, North Carolina, to Sarah Polk. Okay. Uh, really nothing interesting about his life. Yeah, nothing interesting about his life at all. Nothing worth mentioning. Um, well, we got like what? One more. Fort Rucker in Dale County, Alabama. Um, named for Edward Rucker, a colonel appointed acting brigadier general in November. Okay. Edward Westminster Rucker, July 22nd, 1835 to April 13th, 1924. Okay. After the war, he became industrial leader of Birmingham, Alabama. Fort Rucker, Alabama was named in his honor. Wow, man, the whole place after this cat. Early life, born in Tennessee. He didn't do crap. Yeah, it doesn't say too much about his life worth really mentioning. Um, worth really mentioning. Okay, so yeah, man. So I just wanted to bring that out, man. So when they talk about Confederate bases, it is pretty serious because a lot of these. This is 2020. A lot of all of these bases, these Confederate bases, man. These people had slaves and was during the slave year. They wanted slaves. That was their culture. That was what they did. That's what they thought. They thought that you were nothing. They thought that you was less than nothing. They thought that you was worth raping, murdering, capturing, putting on a yoke of iron. They thought that this was what you need. They thought that you was a monkey. They thought that you was an animal. You know what I mean? You see and read history is about them prying your mouth open when you didn't want to eat. You know what I mean? Putting tar on your bodies. Blacks being split apart by horses. Females' bellies being split open and watching a fetus drop down to the floor. This is what they wanted. This is what they did to you. Then they grew up and had a base named after them. And in 2020, you have people still saying, "We want that a part of my life." Okay, so we're gonna move on for there, man. I just keep an eye on that because we're gonna revisit this issue um a little bit, actually a little bit later because matter of fact, there's some places I would say in I want to say in Tennessee. Is it Tennessee or Kentucky? Yeah, a crowd forms line in the front. Hold on.
And thank you for joining us here on the 19.
Listen to this if y'all can hear this.
Tense scene between protesters and a gun-carrying crowd surrounding the Confederate Monument in Brandenburg, Kentucky. That monument sits on the Ohio River about an hour west of Louisville. Brandenburg, you may remember, took it from Louisville in 2016 after the city removed it from the front of the U of L campus where it had been for 120 years. Just an hour ago, a tense confrontation between members of that crowd and protesters yelling Black Lives Matter. And it has been getting tense at moments. We noticed police also stepping in between the residents and about 15 protesters who are chanting. People with guns are not only lined up around the monument, but we're also told that they're up into town protecting some businesses. We talked to resident Cletus Evans, who supports peaceful protests.
There's some legitimate groups that have very good
Cletus his ass. Right, dude.
And they do it peacefully. It's just like when Dr. Martin Luther King protested. He did peaceful protests. It's the groups that went beyond that and tear up buildings. That's when you can't gain anything from that.
Now, the line of people around that monument has been there for hours. The night team's Jesse Cohen is also there describing the scene along the Ohio River.
Well, Doug, here in Brandenburg, Kentucky, we are just continuing to see the crowd behind me grow. As I'm sure you can see, there are a lot of people on the street near the water next to that monument. But when we got here a few hours ago, the only real civilian presence that we were seeing was that L-shaped around the monument. There were a few people trickling in different areas.
It's an L shape.
Were holding their ground. I spoke with the sheriff's office down there earlier, who told me they've called in multiple other law enforcement agencies to assist. That includes other police departments, Kentucky State Police, Kentucky Fish and Wildlife, and the Indiana DNR.
All that just for these white people to protect this damn Confederate statue.
And thank you for joining us here on the Night Team. I'm Doug Prophet. It's a tense scene between protesters.
Hold on.
And thank you for joining us here on the Night Team. I'm Doug Prophet. It's a tense scene.
One of these, y'all should hear this guy talk.
Who are chanting is also the
ground. I spoke with the sheriff's office.
But again, they had the fish and wildlife, the fish guys, they had to turn in all that stuff just for these white people to protect this. Now listen to this. This is a protest in Floyd County. It could be the same place. I don't know, but check this out.
To see these statues and symbols removed, some people in our area are taking a stand for what they say is local history. News reporter Shane Dwyer has the message some in Floyd County shared tonight about their Confederate monument.
In Floyd Thursday night, Confederate flags flapped in the wind, and 24 people say they're taking a stand. Randall Tucker and his wife organized this Save the Monuments protest in front of the Floyd County Courthouse.
It doesn't matter what color, black people, black, pink, purple, white.
Well, I was gonna say some purple people. Like that shit exists.
We're here to save our heritage, our history, trying to teach it and put it down through generation after generation.
This comes after Governor Ralph Northam announced the Robert E. Lee statue in Richmond would come down, and protesters began toppling other monuments on their own. Earlier this week, this woman sat in this exact same area, offering literally to break bread and discuss it. But supporters like Renee Armstrong say otherwise.
You don't pay attention to history, it repeats itself. So we need to learn from these monuments and learn.
What's going to repeat itself? Slavery? Slavery going to repeat itself, she said? If we don't learn from it, they're going to forget?
It reads in memory of the fallen braves, the Confederate soldiers, which this group says isn't offensive.
I don't think it's a shrine. I think it's just a sign of respect. It's got all the battles on the bottom of the monument. Both wins and losses, but I mean, it's an important part of history.
A small handful of people opposed the group's message, including this woman who came with a sign chanting Black Lives Matter. But Tucker and the group remain unswayed.
I want the monument to stay. I want to teach my children about it. I want to teach my grandchildren about it. And as far as I'm concerned, that's where it needs to stay forever.
In Floyd, Shane Dwyer.
All right, you see that lizard towing looking dude talking about something. Oh, I want it to stay for my grandkids. Listen, man. We just read about Robert E. Lee. This man was known for splitting up black families. This man was known for being so I want to say mean, so ruthless to slaves that it caused a slave revolt. Because them brothers knew that they should have been free after that man died. This is who they said, I wanted to be free for the rest of my life. I want to teach my grandkids, all that other weird stuff. This is what they fighting for. This is what they're fighting for. So the next thing, and it brings me to another thing. So when you up there at this protest, right, and you see these brothers out there with music on and they break dancing and there's white groups and black dudes and they having some dance off, walk the hell away from that damn protest. Walk the hell away from that damn protest. Nobody's going to take you serious. When you up there break dancing, spinning on your damn neck, doing the Soul Train line, shucking and jiving, doing all that buck dancing, nobody's going to pay attention to that. Nobody's going to pay attention to that, man, because it's not serious. That does nothing to help the advancement of black people, and it's not going to stop people from being shot. If you out there having a dance during your protest, that's not a protest, man. Now y'all just making a mockery. Y'all making a mockery because people from the 60s and from the 50s, when they was really protesting, they were getting hosed down and attacked by dogs. You out there breakdancing and high-fiving each other. Everything is cool, man. This stuff is serious. An act of, I don't want to say it's an act of war, but it needs to be taken serious. I don't respect any protest that ends up with somebody breakdancing. We got the Soul Train line and Martin Luther King songs is being played. No, man. We have way more leaders than just Martin Luther King. But they telling you who the only leader that you should respect is. Your oppressor tells you to respect Martin Luther King, and you don't even mention the other leaders. You don't even mention the other leaders. The only people you know about is Martin Luther King and Tulsa, Oklahoma. After those two, you know nothing about your own history. Those are the only people that allow you to doggone remember, and you just fall for it. So you go out there and break dance and then spinning on the back of your damn spine. That's stupid. Okay. Another thing I wanted to pull up, speaking of Martin Luther King, we're going to take a look at his protests. Let me see if I can find it. Yep. Okay. Got my beautiful wife here with me, helping me, get some of these topics that we discuss and talk about them with her. You know what I mean? So shout out to the Black sisters, because like they say, behind every man is a beautiful Black woman who's helping him be able to pull off and be able to do the things that he wants to do. He can't just do it on his own, man. So shout out to my wife for this. Check this out. Martin Luther King. Okay, we're gonna talk about some of his protests, because that's the only thing y'all seem to think about is Martin Luther King. Oh, he was so it was so positive and it was so peaceful. Okay, let's listen to this shit. The first one we're gonna go over there is the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 to 1956. We understand about the Rosa Parks. Okay, I'm not gonna get all deep into it. Okay, the boycott proved to be effective, causing their transit system to run a huge deficit. Uh, After all, Montgomery's Black residents not only were the principal boycotters, but also the bulk of the transit system paying the customers. The situation came so intense that the members of the White Citizens Council, a group that opposed racial integration, firebombed Dr. King's house. Let's pause right there. They want you to do the Martin Luther King protests. But when Martin Luther King was doing the damn protest, he had his house firebombed. Which one is it? Which one is it? They want you to do the protest. But when the man himself did the protest, they firebombed his house. Okay, I had another website, and it talked about how when Martin Luther King did this, the people who were doing it with him, they were hosed. They was beaten by the cops. They was attacked by dogs. This is a Martin Luther King protest. So today on Facebook, somebody says somebody forgot about Dr. Martin Luther King's peaceful protest. How peaceful was that? How peaceful was it? Was it peaceful only because Black people didn't turn around and whoop these white people's ass? Or was it peaceful because we allowed y'all to whoop our ass? Which part was the peaceful part? He had his house firebombed. How many kids did Dr. King have? He had his house firebombed. That doesn't just go after Dr. Martin Luther King. That goes after his whole family of innocent children and his wife. What part of the peacefulness do you consider peaceful? The fact that he didn't fight back and he allowed these people, and these people was getting their tails beat, or that he didn't just take out any white people? Which part was the peaceful part, right? So remember, the protest began December 1st, 1955. That was the day of the protest, right? In June 1956, a federal court found that the laws in Alabama and Montgomery requiring segregated buses were unconstitutional. However, an appeal kept segregation intact until December 20th, 1956. when the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the district court's ruling. The boycott's final official end signaled one of the civil rights movement's first victories and made King one of its central figures. This is what, about a year later and some change, right? Until December 1956. Remember, this started in December 1st, 1955. So a year and 19 days later, that's when results happen. These people have been burning. A Target has been burned. A Wendy's been burned. And already you're starting to see some results, right? Swift actions. Swift police reformers being talked about. The people who's been killing the black people has already been fired. It's already happened a lot quicker than what Dr. King did in his peaceful march. Let's read on, because there's a theme that's going to happen. You keep talking about we want a peaceful protest. But what the hell does a peaceful protest really look like? Have we ever seen a peaceful protest where our people was not getting their ass whooped? And is it only peaceful when we're the only ones that's getting beat? Is that when it's peaceful? Let's read on. The Albany Movement in 1961. The Albany Movement was a coalition formed in November 1961 in Albany, Georgia, to protest city segregation policies. Okay, Dr. King joined in December, planning only to counsel the protesters for one day, and said he was jailed during a mass arrest of a peaceful demonstration, and he declined bail until the city changed its segregation policies. This is a peaceful protest, but this man in jail. What part of peaceful do we want? Okay. The city made several concessions, and King left jail and then Albany, probably Albany, Georgia, right? But Albany, Georgia. But he returned to the next year to find that little had actually changed. Upon his return, he was convicted of leading the prior year's protest and sentenced to 45 days in jail or a fine of $178. He chose the jail. 3 days into King's sentence, an Albany police chief arranged for his release. The movement eventually dissolved with few substantial results after nearly a year of continued peaceful protests. But the campaign tested tactics that would shape future. Boring. He did all that, was in jail for a peaceful protest, and it said ain't nothing changed. What part of it, when we say that, or when they say that, we want Dr. King's protest, what part do they want? The part where you're not creating an uproar or making your voice really heard on a national level? Do they just want you to shut up and march with no results? Is that the part of the peaceful protest that they want? Because from this Albany, little has changed. Let's go to another one. The Birmingham Campaign in 1963. Lasting 2 months in 1963, the Birmingham Campaign was strategic efforts started by Dr. King's Southern Christian Leadership Conference to end discriminatory economic policies in the Alabama city. Alabama had a lot of stuff going on. Some of those protests included boycotting certain businesses that hire only white people or that segregated restrooms. I'll go on the record and say this. One thing I've always been very angry about is how hard we fought to be integrated into their society. And we didn't fight that hard to keep our own businesses. We didn't fight that hard, man. That could be the worst thing that ever happened to us. Integration. Not in the sense of integration where I don't feel the need to say anything else, but fighting so hard to be a part of somebody else's system that you don't build up your own system. Okay, let me go ahead and read on, because that starts to make me mad. When businesses refused to change their policies, protesters held sit-ins, remember the sit-ins, right, and marches, with the aim of getting arrested. King encouraged these nonviolent tactics so that the city's jails would overflow. Police used high-pressured hoses and dogs to control protesters. Are you hearing me? They use high pressured hoses and dogs to control the peaceful protesters. Some of them were children. By the end of the campaign, many segregation signs at Birmingham businesses came down, and public places became more open to all races. On the tactic used in Birmingham campaign, King said, the purpose of direct action is to create a situation so crisis packed that it will inevitably open the doors to negotiation. Let me ask again, because this is three protests in. Is a peaceful protest only when black people are dying, getting hosed, and attacked by police dogs? Is that the only thing you consider a peaceful protest? Because at no point in time in none of these three protests did black people not suffer, right or wrong. At no point in time, none of these protests so far did black people not suffer. It was only deemed peaceful because we didn't fight back physically. So again, what is a peaceful protest? Because by the looks of these three, at the end of the day, chaos has to happen. Now, who gives it? That's the interesting question. When black people fight back, is it then not a peaceful protest? And if I just stand there and get my ass whooped, is it then deemed a peaceful protest when I don't defend myself? Let's go on. March on Washington for Jobs and for Freedom, 1963. Perhaps Dr. King's most famous act as a civil rights leader came during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom on August 28, 1963, the largest politically rally ever seen in the U.S. It drew 200,000 to 300,000 police and participants, to whom Dr. King delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech on the steps of Lincoln Memorial. And nobody ever says all that. Don't ever read the whole speech. Among other things, the speech advocated um, racial harmony and economic rights for African Americans. Observers estimated that nearly 80% of the marches were black. Okay, that didn't really give into details. It was just a gathering where I guess, he delivered a speech. Okay, it was a march on Washington. Okay, I would like to look it up and see during the march what was happening. What was the people on the side watching the march? What were they shouting? What were they throwing? Who were the police trying to protect? The black people or the other people? Let's go on. Bloody Sunday, 1965. Dr. King and several other civil rights leaders organized three marches from Selma, Alabama to the state capital of Montgomery in a bid for voting rights for all. The first on Sunday, March 7th, 1965, involved nearly 600 protesters who marched east from Selma on the U.S. Highway 80. You know what's funny? I was fortunate to be able to walk across walk downtown Selma and go over the bridge to St. I think it's like Edmonds Bridge, wasn't it? The Edmund Pettus Bridge, man, and it's a sight to see. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna say I had goosebumps, but I did pause. And down there's like a little cathedral, I want to say. It's a little area, and it's like from way back then where you can see it's like a little, you know how you gather for like concerts and stuff. It's like a little amphitheater. Yeah, it's like an old amphitheater right there, right off when you get off to your left if you're facing the other way from the bridge. And it is kind of surreal to see how far the water is and how big this bridge is. And just imagine these brothers walking down there. You know what I mean? In March, when it's getting warm, all these people, 600 protesters, all marching. I mean, Selma, man, it's a lot of history in Alabama as it is, man. But when you go to Selma, I think to me that's when I've been to Alabama, I've been to Birmingham, I've been to Opelika, I've been to different places. But to me, Selma, that name to me is just a real historic name. And obviously it's from this and seeing all this, man. But I have to really say that, man. Much respect to the brothers and sisters down in Selma, Alabama, living day to day, knowing that history is there, and their uncles and I mean their grandparents being a part of that and hearing stories growing up, man. That's pretty deep. Okay. March east of Selma on a U.S. Highway 80, led by John Lewis of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, with the Reverend Hosea Williams of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. King was not present because he had church duties, but days before, King had met with the governor officials to try to ensure the marches would not be impeded. Even so, mob and police violence caused the march to be aborted on that bloody Sunday. When film footage of the police brutality was broadcast around the country, it was sparked widespread public outrage and helped to boost support for the civil rights. It was so bad that it sparked outrage. Like, yo, man, it was a violent protest. It was violent. So again, when we say we need Dr. King's peaceful protest, who is the ones being peaceful? Is it only peace when Black people are suffering? When they're getting beat, when they're getting hosed, when they're getting attacked by dogs? Is it only peaceful when footage of us getting beaten? Is that when you call peaceful? Or is it peaceful, or is it non-peaceful when we have a chance to defend ourselves and say, you're not going to treat my wife or my daughter like that? You're not going to hit my son like that. I'm going to stand in front of that, and we're going to fight. We're going to fight back. Is that one is non-peaceful? That's not a Dr. King march because you defended your family. Is that's when you say have a problem with? Is the problem me fighting back? Or is the problem, or is it not a problem when I don't fall back and allow you to beat me? And hopefully somebody has enough sympathy to say, okay, that's enough. Don't beat them anymore. Think about it. On the event, King later wrote, if I had any idea that the state troopers would use the kind of brutality they did, I would have felt compelled to give up my church duties altogether to lead the line. Dr. King wasn't even there. He wasn't even there. King tried to organize another march, but protesters did not succeed in getting to Montgomery until March 25th. The speech he delivered that day on the steps of the state capitol, has since become known as How Long, Not Long. Bloody Sunday was a turning point in the civil rights movement, building public support and clearly demonstrating King's strategy of non-violence. That man, which wasn't his fault, saw his people go down there to march after he had spoken to the people that they would be marching and didn't want them to be stopped. Sat back in awe as his people were beaten violently, to the point where he says, man, I feel so bad that I should have been down there getting beaten with them. Again, what part of Dr. King's peaceful protest are we talking about? Again, let me keep saying it. Is it only peaceful when Black people are getting violently beaten and not defending themselves? And is it not peaceful when it becomes a Black man standing up for his family and says, enough of this shit? I'm tired of watching my people die. Is that when it's non-violent? Is that when it starts to become, oh, you're rioting? Oh, this isn't a Dr. King's march then? Isn't it funny how we know about Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, but nobody says anything about Malcolm X? They telling you who they want you to have as a leader, and we buy it. And we don't think about the other leaders who did not have that same idea of standing there and getting beaten and taking ass whoopings, but said we will defend ourselves. We will separate. We will build our own selves. Let's go on, man. I hope this is registering with y'all because it's really deep for me. Chicago, 1966. After successful demonstrations in the Southern and the South, Dr. King and civil rights leaders sought to spread the movement north. They chose Chicago. I wonder why they needed to spread it north. I guess some stuff was going on, right? They chose Chicago as their next destination to to take on black urban problems, especially segregation in the North in Chicago. Oh, you don't hear about that, do you? To show his commitment to the Northern campaign, King rented an apartment in the slums of North Lawndale in the city's of the west side. One Friday afternoon in August, King led about 700 people on a golly, it's a lot of people on a march to Marquette Park in Chicago's southwest side, a white enclave, to protest housing segregation. Thousands of white people gathered, taunting King and other protesters. At one point, a brick hit King in the head, but he continued the march as onlookers hurled rocks, bottles, firecrackers at the marchers. 30 people, including King, were injured. On Chicago's protest, King later said, "I have seen many demonstrations in the South, but have never seen anything so hostile and hateful as I've seen here today." He continued, "I have to do this to expose myself, to bring this hate into the open." This man just heard, what is it, what, the year before? Bloody Sunday. Went up north to Chicago and said, "I've never seen anything like I have seen today." After him seeing are people being bit by dogs, hoes, violence that shook the nation to the point where they said, "All right, listen to these people." But Chicago stood out to him in the North. Look at the energy and the spirit that's in Chicago now. Look at the murders that's going on in Chicago now. Well, what about black on black crime in Chicago? Well, wait a minute, damn it. Look at the spirit that was in Chicago back in 1966. Black people were dying. Look at the energy that's been on that place for a long time. The scripture says, "Woe to a city that's founded upon blood." Keep that in mind. Vietnam War opposition, 1967. Dr. King, an opponent of the Vietnam War, denounced Americans' involvement in a series of speeches and at rallies and demonstrations. His first speech on the war itself in 1967 was called Beyond Vietnam and was delivered exactly 1 year before his assassination. In it, he criticized the U.S. government, insisting it was the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. What did he just say? He criticized the U.S. government, insisting it was the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today. The U.S. government was the greatest. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. With righteous indignation, it will look across the seas and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia, Africa, South America, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of countries and say this is not just. Later that year, King commented on the cruel irony of Black Americans dying for a country that treats them as second-class citizens. We were taking the young Black men who have been crippled by our society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Harlem. This is East Harlem, that's New York, that's the North, right? And we have been repeatedly faced with cruel irony of watching Negro and white boys on TV screens as they kill and die together for a nation that has been unable to seat them in the same schools. King's opposition of the Vietnam War cost him many white allies, including President Lyndon Johnson, and many members of the media, criticizing one of his speeches. Life magazine called it demologic slander that sounded like a script of Radio Hano. The Washington Post also said King had diminished his unusefulness to his cause, his country, and his people. In January 1968, the day after President Johnson's State of the Union address, King called for a march on Washington to protest what he called one of the history's most cruel and senseless wars. Very interesting, man. Our brothers been dying in these wars. I got uncles, man, who suffer pains jumping out of planes, suffering hearing loss. You get what I'm saying? Brothers has been involved in every aspect of this so-called place, so-called freedom place, so-called place that is liberty and justice for all. Yet we're treated like animals. Okay, this is the last one, and then I'll move on. Poor People's Campaign, 1968. Organized by Dr. King and a Southern Christian Leadership Conference in 1968. The so-called Poor People's Campaign sought to address issues of economic justice and housing for the poor. King traveled the country to assemble a diverse group of protesters representing the poor, which would march on Washington until Congress created a Bill of Rights for poor Americans. After King's assassination in April 1968, the SCLC members continued the campaign, organizing protests in Washington, D.C., joined by D.C.'s poor and homeless. The protesters effectively shut down the city that summer. The Bill of Rights they envisioned never became law. These are Dr. King's. So when you talk about something, we need Dr. King's protest, man, I don't think people realize what these young brothers and sisters who followed Dr. King and Dr. King himself was actually going through. And I'll say this the last time. When we say that we want a peaceful protest, is it only peaceful while Black people are getting violently beaten and not fighting back? Is that what you call peaceful? Because a majority of it, that's what happened. That's what a peaceful protest was looking like. That's what you look at Dr. King and says, oh, his peaceful protests. Well, wait a minute. When you look at his protest, this is what's happening. We was getting beaten, attacked by police dogs, hosed down, bricks thrown at us, assassinations, protests that you didn't even hear us out at the end. It didn't even, no results. That's what a Dr. King peaceful protest looked like. Is that what you're saying that you want? Is that what they're saying that they want from us? So they can continue to beat us and violently beat us and violently disrespect us? I'm not letting my daughter go through that. I'm not letting my son see me just in a position where I don't stand up as a man. Those times is ended because the Most High Yahweh did not give us a spirit of fear, but he did tell us to use wisdom. So you don't go out there and you don't antagonize the cops. You don't go out there and you don't go out there and commit no crimes. You be a man and protect your family. You raise your family right. You be and you show your children what a man is supposed to be like, and you protect your wife. That's what an alpha Black man is supposed to do. That's what you do. You spend time with your children. You lead them. You teach them. You connect with the Creator. You submit to his instructions. Let him lead your life. That's what a Black man is supposed to do. Next to his Black queen. That's what a Black man is supposed to do. But you might not be afraid to protect your family. Never be afraid of that. Okay? The protests started working. You're starting to see it. The reason why I wanted to read that, because when Martin Luther King was doing things, it took a long time. It took years. Sometimes they didn't work out, and it took years for this. But already we're talking about a police reform. The questions now that's been going on in barbershops have been starting to happen. They've been starting to happen. How do we reform the police? The police were. I want to read y'all something. The police were started with let me read y'all something. This is from Eastern Kentucky University, written by Victor E. Kapler, PhD. Okay. The birth and development of the American police can be traced to the multitude of historical, legal, and political economic conditions. The institute of slavery and the control of minorities, however, were two of the more formidable historic features of American society, shaping early policing. Slave patrols and night watches, which later became modern police departments, were both designed to control the behavior of minorities. So now, in the foundation of policing, the idea of what a black man looks like, or a bad guy or a criminal looks like, is a black man. Let me read this again. Were both designed to control the behaviors of minorities. Okay. For example, the New England settlers appointed Indian constables to police Native Americans. National Constable Association in 1995, the St. Louis Police were founded to protect residents from Native Americans in a frontier city. And many Southern police departments began as slave patrols. In 1704, the colony of Carolina developed the nation's first slave patrol. Slave patrols helped to maintain the economic order and to assist the wealthy landowners in recovering and punishing slaves who essentially were considered property. Policing was not the only social institution enmeshed in slavery. Slavery was fully institutionalized in American economic and legal order, with laws being enacted at both the state and national divisions of government. Virginia, for example, enacted more than 130 slave statutes between 1989 and 1865. Listen to this: 130 slave statutes, which is like a law, or it's like something that the police need to look for and to see what is breaking a crime, right? Between 1689 and 1865, that's well over 100 years, right? Slavery and the abuse of people of color, however, was not merely a Southern affair, and many have been taught to believe, Connecticut, New York, and other colonies enacted laws to criminalize and control slaves. Congress also passed fugitive slave laws allowing the detention and return of escaped slaves in 1793 and 1850. As Turner, Guy Passy, and Vandiver remarked, the literature clearly establishes that a legally sanctioned law enforcement system existed in America before the Civil War for the express purpose of controlling the slave population and protecting the interests of slave owners. The similarities between the slave patrols and modern policing are too salient to dismiss or ignore. That means they're too similar. Hence, the slave patrol should be considered a forerunner of the modern American law enforcement. The legacy of slavery and racism did not end after the Civil War. In fact, it can be argued that extreme violence against people of color became even worse with the rise of vigilante groups who resisted Reconstruction, because vigilantes, by definition, have no extreme resistance. Lynch mobs had a justified reputation for hanging minorities first and asking questions later because of its tradition of slavery, which rested on the racist realization that blacks were subhuman. America had long and shameful history of mistreating people of color. Long after the end of the Civil War, perhaps the most infamous American vigilante group was the terrorist organization, I added those words, Ku Klux Klan. Started in the 1860s, were notorious for assaulting and lynching black men for transgressions that would not be considered crimes at all, had a white man committed them. Lynching occurred across the entire country, not just the South. Finally, in 1871, Congress passed the Ku Klux Klan Act, which prohibited state actors from violating the civil rights of all citizens, in part because of law enforcement involvement with the infamous Ku Klux Klan group. This legislation, however, did not stem the tide of racial or economic abuse that persisted well into the 1960s. Again, finally, in 1871, the Congress passed the Ku Klux Klan Act. Let me jump down. This legislation, however, did not stem the tide of racial or economic abuse that persisted well into the 1960s. Again, In 1871, the act was passed, and it persisted well into the 1960s. That's a long damn time. And you know what? Why it was passed? Because the law enforcements were doing the same thing as the Ku Klux Klan. From 1871 to the 1960s. Last paragraph. Though having white skin did not prevent discrimination in America, being white undoubtedly made it easier for economic minorities to assimilate into the mainstream America. The additional burden of racism has made the transition more difficult for those whose skin is black, red, brown, or yellow. In no small part because of the tradition of slavery, blacks have long been a target of abuse. The use of patrols to capture runaway slaves was one of the precursors of formal police forces, especially in the South. This disastrous legacy persisted as an element of the police role even after the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964. In some cases, police harassment simply meant people of African descent were more likely to be stopped and questioned by police. Wow, 2020 is the same shit, right? While at the other extreme, they have suffered beatings and even murder at the hands of white police. I'll stop right there. This is a brief history of slavery and the origin of American police, written by Victor E. Kepler, a PhD at Eastern Kentucky University. Mm, That's a lot of information. Um, that is a whole bunch of information, actually. Um, I actually have more from the National Law Enforcement Museum, but I'm not going to read it because that just said everything, man. In order for you to stop police from killing Black Americans, you have to disband it and start it over with a separate set of rules. Simply because the start of policing here in America, which was founded on blood, and we know what the scripture says, is that when they look at a criminal from the foundation, it taught you that the criminal was you, the black man, the slave, the less than human, the animal, the ape, the monkey, the nigger, the negro, the colored, the black, the gator bait. That's what he deemed as a criminal. So now, all these years later, the foundation and the thought of what a criminal looks like and all this glory, you were the criminal. That's why it has to be disbanded and start over. And I do agree that this will go on to the next segment. I do agree that when we vote, we have to do more than vote. Let's move on to that. We're almost done here, man. Bear with the brother. This is Yashi Yahoo again. Okay. Let me go. Let me see what else I got. Voting. I want to talk Braden. Okay, voting. We have to get involved, man. What is voting? How do you vote? Okay. Let's see. Okay. No, I think it's this one. Okay. How do you vote? You go down there, you pull the lever, ta-da. It's not how you do it, people. Okay. You have this candidate who's running. You like what they're saying. Do I vote for presidents? I'm not a big person for presidents. I'm more local. I like to vote local. Right? Why? Because it includes you, it includes your children, it includes your family. I think that would I vote for president? Maybe, depending if I like what he says. I think what's happening these days is that we're voting and say, my family voted Democrat, I'm going to vote Democrat. My family voted Republican, I'm going to vote Republican. We're not listening to what they're saying. And we're not listening to the history or looking at the history of the candidate that we're voting for. It's just that, oh, he's opposed to Donald Trump, I'm going to vote for him. But what if the two candidates were literally the same? They just wore different colors. Sounds like a gang, don't it? What if they were the same? What if the only difference in them is the type of terminology that they use to describe things? Because if you look at the history, if their history hasn't done anything for black people, neither of them, then wouldn't you say that they were the same? Because when it comes down to it, their priorities was not helping the black community. So now, who do you vote for? If neither of them option is or ideology is the benefit and advancement of the black people or the black community, do you then just pick anybody just to say I voted Democrat? No, you don't do that. And I think that black people have to stop being so I'm stuck on this and I have to vote this and not listening and looking at the history and what they represented throughout their 30, 40 years of running in office. You got 40 years of locking up black men, but you're the Democratic candidate. Do you think we're going to just vote do you think that you should just vote for them if their whole history is locking up black people, disenfranchising black people just because they're the Democratic nominee going against a Republican? No, because at the end of the day, they're two of the same evils. So you go down there and you say, I'm going to vote for this guy because he is a Democrat, right? Well, what do you do next? If this guy is in your community and he's having meetings, you should go down to the meetings. You should go door to door if you think that he's a benefit to the community. Go door to door, go down to the meetings, get in contact with the people who are running, see how you can get involved. We have to start maximizing our choices. He goes down there and he gets $20,000, $12,000, $10,000, $15,000 in funding from various groups. Who do you think his allegiance lies to? The person who just pulled the lever, or the people who pulled the lever and gave him $20,000 to bag him up and keep him running? See, what happens is we think that because we pulled that lever, our vote counts. No, he is now obligated to repay back those $20,000 in support and get whoever gave him $20,000 is like, yo, bro, I want this law passed and I want this group looked at and I want this group done this and I want this organization put up on a pedestal. And he's obligated because he didn't give you $20,000. And your simple ass just sitting on the couch talking some, bruh, I voted. You have to get more involved. You have to get more involved. Matter of fact, I want to ask this question. What is the difference between mayors and governors? See, we have black mayors. How many black governors do we got? What is the difference and what do they do? Let's read this. The duties of a mayor differ from city to city. A mayor is elected at the municipal election along with the city council, school boards, and park commissioners. Often they are in charge of the police force and can sign and veto citywide bills, although sometimes the city council doesn't need mayoral approval. Often the mayor is just a figurehead or an administrative role. Mayors run cities, okay? Yeah. Now let's look at the governor. Now remember, it's talking about the mayor and the chief and the police power. So you look at Mayor Bottoms from Atlanta. She's like, I'm calling for a fire of this police chief, right? It makes sense because she has a connection to the police, right? But check this now. The governor has a lot more power. The governor is the head of a particular state's executive branch. The governor has the power to approve or veto bills brought up by the state Senate or the state House of Representatives. The governor speaks on behalf of his or her political party for a whole state. Now, when you talk about laws getting passed, who has the power to really be for black people? Sounds like the governor, don't it? It sounds like the governor has the power to say, you know what? We need a lot more laws passed that for the advancement of the black people. See, the mayor, she can help with the police. For instance, when I lived in Douglasville, they had a racist police chief. And then they hired a black police chief. That's the mayor. a black sheriff. That's the mayor. But now when you look at the governor, he look at these laws and say, you know what, man, a lot of this stuff is injustice for black people. A lot of this stuff is not helpful for black people. A lot of the stuff y'all trying to pass disenfranchises black people. It tears apart their communities. So yeah, we got black mayors, but where's our black governors that we get behind that run our state? Where they at? Those are the ones that talk to the what? The Senate. Now, when you look at the Senate and you look at all that stuff, and they're talking about, oh, see, Obama couldn't get stuff passed because they had the Congress and the Senate. Well, who the hell talks to the Senate? It's the governor. It's the governors. See, we've been fooled. They've been throwing you a coin and forgot about the dollar. That's the problem, man. It's like a magic trick. You see the end result, but you don't see the hand underneath the table that's doing all the work. That's the governor. So yeah, we got Keisha Bottoms, but who are the governors that we need to be backing? Are we talking to them directly, or are leaders in their ears saying, hey, we need to help out our communities? That's who we should be getting in contact with. That's who we should be backing. When you vote, y'all just can't pull that lever and disappear. Go down to the town hall meetings. When I was in Douglasville, I would always go down to the town hall meetings as a leader of the congregation in Douglasville. It was my responsibility to have to see what was going on in my community. So I would go down there, or I would talk to some of the leaders of the political party down there that were running in the state of the city of Douglasville, and I was emailing them. We were going back and forth on what laws should be passed and what zones need to be really helped out more and what shouldn't be helped out more and where the money should go. Those are the things that we have to be involved with. It's more than just pulling that lever and casting your ballot. You have to start getting more involved in who's running, why they're running, and what is the history of what they've been running. Because if they got 30 years and ain't nothing been done for black people, guess what? These next 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 ain't gonna be no different. Right? All right, man. Let's go on, man. Last one, not least. There are 2 types of senators. Each state has 2 senators to represent the state at the Capitol. They speak on behalf of the state as a separate entity within the union, as opposed to the representatives, which are determined by the population and speak on behalf of the populace. It is a subtle distinction that doesn't matter quite as much nowadays. Each state also has a state senate. These are people from towns across the state that represent their areas in the state capital. It is a similar role. All 3 positions are always elected. No words or capital. Okay, whatever. But just okay. Let me see. The branches are executive. But yeah, we need to start understanding who our governors are and start putting black people in a governor position. That's what we should be doing. We're worried about Trump. We're worried about Obama, but we ain't even controlling our own cities, and if we are, we're not controlling our states. Control the state, then you can have more voice when it comes to the Senate and the Congress on which laws that they push up or which laws are getting passed. That's how you start to make your voice and your vote count. Okay? I just wanted to touch on real quick because I thought this was stupid. Okay, I just saw a commercial yesterday when it talks about Band-Aid, I guess, as what's going on now, is now making different colored Band-Aids for different shades of black. This is their answer. After all these years of getting our tails whooped, getting our ass whooped, Band-Aid just now has said, you know what? I'm going to make a dark-skinned Band-Aid. You see why these protests work? Because shit that should have been passed or should have been common sense, it's now like, okay, we'll do it. Netflix, you know how Netflix, they have these movies and they disappear. Hulu, they have these shows and they disappear. All of a sudden, they got black shows. Where were they at before? They so readily available too. It's like they clicked the button and said, okay, open up. Ice Cube said that there was a whole bunch of sequels and prequels to movies that black people love, but these white execs just got them sitting down there. Dave Chappelle said that I told him I wasn't gonna wear no dress, and they had a script already wrote up with me not wearing a dress. It's already there, people. All you got to do is be strong enough to say enough is enough. All you got to do is be strong enough to say, man, this is some bullshit. I'm not going to do this. All you got to do is be willing to walk away and know your worth to see if they really got your best interest of heart. All you got to do, you say no, you say I'm not going to do this no more. You say I'm not going to degrade myself. If they want you bad enough, they'll make a way for you. And if not, don't belittle yourself. Know your worth, black people. Um, Yesterday I had a lot of videos about the Million Man March yesterday. I thought it was productive. I thought it was beautiful to see the people out there. I thought that there was one white dude out there dressed in some damn green. I thought it was weird, man. I thought it was weird. He said they were a volunteer group, but they've been chosen by the Million Man March, but he couldn't give nobody's name. He said, "Oh, just random people out here chose us. They weren't hired, but yet they were called. That means you're hired. If you were requested, but you're not hiring y'all volunteers, that means, well, wait a minute, how are they paying you? How are you traveling? If somebody drives through the crowd, we're here to protect you. Well, who governs you and what rules do you follow as a form of protection? And after you do protect, where do you go? Do you stand up and talk to the police, or do you run? Or do you allow black people to take the blame? Be careful when you see Wendy's burning up. Be careful when you see police and CNN buildings getting broken into, but be careful when you start seeing destruction on who's really causing this. There's agents out there, man. I'm not a conspiracy theory, man, but yesterday was kind of creepy, man, seeing this guy who couldn't identify really who he was with besides just, you know, generalized statements. And he's just there with handcuffs and a gun. Well, who gave you that? And where do you take these people? And do you have the power to detain somebody in the backseat of your car to take them to a police station? Where do you do that at? Be careful, brothers. Be careful, sisters, while y'all out there. Um, and yeah, man. So I appreciate y'all just tuning in to Black Man's Thoughts, man. I had a few things I had to say today. Again, yesterday's Million Man March was amazing. I loved it. Getting a chance to be out there, and just seeing the brothers and sisters in the yellow deem, the children out there. Just my Israelite brothers and sisters, man. Y'all be safe out there. Recognize who y'all around. Recognize that every black people ain't black people. Every Israelite ain't Israelites. Every people that you're around ain't for you. Be smart. Be men. Take care of your families. Protect your families. Don't go out there looking for trouble. If you get that tingling sense in your body, that may be the ruach, that may be the spirit saying, hey, man, it's time to get out of there. Don't start no fights. Be vigilant. Be watchful. You know what I mean? May the Most High be with you. Shalom. This is another episode of Black Man's Thoughts, man. Much love to y'all. Shalom.